Thank you, one and all, for joining us on this dialogue at our UNEP at 50 dialogue series that we have been running now for a year. That the Center for Governance and Sustainability began in May of 21 as a result of the pandemic. We turned online, and it is with immense pleasure that I'm hosting today a very, very esteemed panel of speakers from around the world to think about the issues that we're facing, moving forward from 50 years of environmental governance as we prepare to celebrate Stockholm Plus 50, the 50th anniversary of the first UN conference on the human environment. We are just starting our dialogue. My name is Maria Ivanova. I'm a professor of global governance at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. I am also the director of the Center for Governance and Sustainability. And I will now say proudly, Juliet, that I was also a member of the Rwanda delegation to the UN Environment Assembly, negotiating the momentous new resolution on a new global agreement to end plastic pollution. And so today we gather here on online, on Zoom, to think about the last 50 years, celebrate UNEP's 50th, conclude this session, and move forward as we prepare for Stockholm Plus 50, the commemoration that is happening in Stockholm in June, the first week of June. And with me today, I have representatives currently in government, formerly in government, to think about what has worked, where have been some challenges, how do we move forward, and how do we help create that new global agreement, learning from agreements that have worked to various extents, and figuring out what do we learn as individuals, what do we learn as institutions. So I am delighted to welcome Juliet Kabera, the Director General of the Rwanda Environment Management Authority and the lead negotiator for Rwanda at the UN Environment Assembly that concluded in March in Nairobi, and adopted the new resolution on ending plastic pollution and creating a new global treaty on plastics. I am also delighted to welcome Manuel Pulgar-Vidal, who was the environment minister of Peru and was the president of the climate COP, the Conference of the Parties in Lima, where not only countries, but all kinds of constituencies, companies, citizens could make commitments. Welcome, Manuel. Also delighted to welcome Andrea Guerrero-Garcia, who was the former lead negotiator for Colombia for climate. And Andrea is joining us from Boston, which I am particularly proud to say, as our institution is based in Boston. And we're also joined by Joshua Wycliffe from Fiji, the Permanent Secretary for Environment of Fiji. So Joshua, we don't see your video yet, but we see you online. So with this, I welcome all of you to this space. I welcome all of our participants in this dialogue. Here you are. Thank you, Joshua. It is in the middle of the night for you in Fiji. It is so late that it's early in the morning, and we really appreciate you coming in. It's really, it's humbling. Thank you. And I would like to welcome all of the participants who are joining us today from around the world. Many of you have been with us throughout this year of dialogues, and we're opening the discussion. Please put questions in the Q&A box. Please put comments in the chat box. And we have 2 doctoral students from the PhD program in global governance and human security that will moderate the chat space and engage with you. And indeed, we will also reward the one who is most active on in the chat and on Twitter, and we will send you a copy of the book on UNEP. I forgot to pull out this one, the Untold Story of the World's Leading Environmental Institution, UNEP at 50. Oh yes, thank you, Manuel. That has become an important book for those who are studying UNEP or working in global environmental governance. And with this, I'd like to welcome all of you to this space. Juliet, Joshua, Manuel, Andrea, welcome. I would actually like to start and ask each of you, you have, incredible biographies. People know who you are, but I would like to ask you to say one thing that you would like people to remember you for, to remember you with from this dialogue. So one thing that defines you. Juliet, we'll start with you. Who are you? Who is Juliet Kabera?
I was hoping that you start with Andrea.
Okay, Andrea.
Nice one. Well played, Juliet. It's very hard to define yourself as just one thing. I think we're different people from 1 hour to the next even. But I think in this context, I would say, as many other people working on climate and climate negotiators, I'm perseverant. And you need to be in this game. So that's the one thing I would define myself. I'm a climate optimist, and you have to have passion and perseverance in this work.
Passion and perseverance and climate optimism. Fantastic. Now, Juliet, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Juliet, I'm an environmental manager, I think. Policymakers sometimes, but to a large extent, in the process, in the daily struggle to implement, to follow up, to make sure that those great policies, great instruments are implemented. I take part in negotiations sometimes, but I only negotiate the things that I think would make a difference to the lives of the day-to-day person. That's when I can manage to stay awake for long hours for the things that are going to maybe make me look like an eloquent speaker. They might not keep me awake all night, but if I know that this is going to make a difference to my less privileged, relative or friend or somewhere deep in the village in Rwanda who does not know what environment management exactly means in terms of studies, figures, and numbers, if I can be able to break it down through piloting projects, through demonstrations, through awareness raising in a language, in a format they understand, then I can spend more hours working on that.
Thank you, Juliet. A policymaker deeply committed to making a difference. So she'll only take what really matters. And we'll talk about what you led on in the plastics in a few minutes. Well, thank you very much. So Joshua Wycliffe, Permanent Secretary, over to you. What defines you? You are a current policymaker, a current politician.
Thank you, Maria. I'm not sure if I should want to call myself a politician. I'm the last level of bureaucracy, although I am appointed politically. I I'd like to be remembered as someone who can innovate resilience among development state communities. Someone who would like to be creative and bring forth solutions to communities smaller and development states, especially in the face of climate change, its impacts. So that's where my passion lies, where I can bring forth solutions, unique, those solutions that will fit in a particular community, especially the coastal communities.
Thank you. Yes, being where you are in Fiji, the impact on coastal communities from climate is dramatic, and we'll talk about that throughout this 1 hour today that we have together. Manuel, you are a former environment minister, but what defines you? What would you like people to remember about you here in this space?
As a funny guy. So Maria, no, in a time in which we are pushing the word for a transformational change, I am used to thinking that what we do need to have it is 4 elements: forward thinking, systemic thinking, move innovative ideas beyond business as usual borders, and innovative leadership. Those are key elements. We won't be able to create that transformational change if we are not able to develop those 4 key principles or values for promoting that change, not only in the private sector, but in the public. We have to strongly work in the public sector in promoting a new kind of leadership. It is the only way to achieve what we have defined as our vision for the SDGs, for the climate debate, for the national debate, for all the multilateral process. So those are my 4 elements always.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuel. And I'm happy to say that I see among the participants, which many of the participants here will not see because this is a webinar form, but I see some former very innovative leaders. Dan Reef-Snyder is with us. Solveig Crampton is with us. So Dan Reef-Snyder from the US, Solveig from Norway. So we have people who have been in this space. Uno Svedin from Sweden. Thank you for coming here and engaging in this. So we'll push these boundaries of innovative leadership, courage, bravery, and let me start with Juliet, because that is a case study of courage. Rwanda taking the leadership, and indeed Rwanda and Peru, 2 small states, taking the leadership on a new plastics treaty and driving it through the UN Environment Assembly. And so governments adopted this groundbreaking resolution, and it was described as the most significant environmental deal since the Paris Accord. And so today in this space, we will talk about Paris and climate, what was significant before Paris with the Lima COP from Manuel, during Paris with Andrea, what is really significant in terms of climate, and Joshua with small states that are actually island states, and how we are taking this forward into the realm of plastics. So Juliet, you led the Rwandan delegation during those negotiations. Please share with us, how did Rwanda come to be in this leadership position? What are the key accomplishments? What were some of the challenges? Share with us your thinking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria, and thank you for co-leading with us during the negotiation. So it's about, we were trying to build on the experience as a country that we have had since 2004 in trying to manage, in trying to beat plastic pollution. This is a decision that my government chose to ban the use of polythene bags. That's what it was called back then. Right now, we have it as the ban of single-use plastics. And this is a journey that we've been working for all those years. And why we even start thinking about that, the need to ban plastic bags, is because we had done an impact study kind of a cost-benefit analysis study in 2004. And that study showed us that there is a lot of loss, a lot of damages being caused just because we are using polythene bags, and the level of waste management, the capacity to manage the different types of waste was still at infancy stage. So it made sense that we, to the point of Manuel, innovatively find a way to do away with the use of, there's so much dependence of the people to polythene bags. So it was a bold decision, not easy at all. We didn't have solutions, but we had the leadership and we had the will to actually make this work. And we knew that we could survive, hardly needed to make a little bit of adjustments, sometimes endure some inconveniences, but for the bigger cause. So that went on, and we have the participation of almost every institution in the country. We have the districts, we have enforcement institutions. We have the biggest institution, which is the people, the Rwandans, who we tell the dangers of using polythene that they see for themselves. When we're talking about a cow, for example, Rwanda is a country that does a lot of farming. So if we are talking about cattle ingesting polythene and these cattle are dying, the owners, the farmers really see that. So when we come up with an idea of doing away with the plastics, it makes sense because this is what they see on a daily basis. But that said, illegal use is still going on. Yes, we are doing our best to curb it, but this again brought to our attention that we cannot go on to fight the illegal use of plastics because the borders are porous. It's not easy to actually make sure that you don't have these get illegally imported into the country. So we sought a regional, understanding of this, and through the East African community, the Rwanda representatives in the legislature of the EAC actually initiated this discussion. And as we speak, the East African community has a law that bans the use of polythene carry bags in the five, are they five? We are six now, in the six member states of the EAC. And it gets better because, again, we see that the trade is open. It's a global village. We are doing a lot of trade across the globe. And it's not that we are only using imports from the region. We also have them from far-off continents. So that is when we started thinking about what would it look like if the whole world now looked at polythene as a big source of plastics as a big source of pollution. And this can go both sides because the people in trade would look at it as a source of income and so on. But when we put on the balance, where do we want to go? We have a lot of studies that have been conducted projecting what it would look like in future. The phrase of having more plastic than the fish in the ocean, that has been on for some time, but someone needs to take the first step and request that something is done. So we talked, we had a platform like this. It was during the COVID again, and there was a discussion, what can we do? Do you see these rising numbers of plastics in the marine ecosystems? I think a lot of studies have been done in marine ecosystems. So it made a lot of sense that now the world is trying to converge around a global solution, and Rwanda offered to actually produce the first draft of the draft resolution, but it had a disclaimer that we are not going to talk about marine environments only, because we have plastic pollution in other terrestrial environments. That's when the idea of looking at plastic pollution in the entire life cycle of plastics came from. Peru was on the same platform, and they were like, we are also happy to join. So the time zones are very hard to meet, but we made it. We would meet in strange hours to agree on that, to discuss the drafts. Sometimes we disagree, but we agree to disagree. And at some point, we agreed that we need to get other people to speak into this. That is when we started looking for co-sponsors of this draft resolution. And before long, we had around 60 member states co-sponsoring the Rwanda-Peru draft resolution. And it was overwhelming support at the UNEP 5.2. Where we got a lot of inputs, a lot of ideas that were not accommodated before, brought into what we have, the resolution right now. And we are very optimistic that we are going to have a legal instrument that really tackles the plastic pollution issue from all value chains, so to speak, not looking at it from the end of life or waste, but throughout.
Juliet, I'll have to interfere here. We have only an hour. We have these amazing people. Let's learn from each other. You did lead this as a small state, indeed, with Peru. And all of you today are representatives of small states. And I'm going to jump to Andrea now. And actually, as the lead negotiator, so you were kind of in Juliet's position on climate and the lead negotiator for Colombia. And so how did you manage that difficult agreement negotiations? And what can you tell Juliet? Here's what I've learned as a negotiator in climate that you as a negotiator on plastic need to push forward.
Thank you, Maria. And that was inspiring, Juliet. Thank you very much. It's so encouraging to see this process be born, and it's so needed. So the first caveat I would say is the Paris Agreement negotiation it took years. It took more than 10 years in the making. So it wasn't, it was a marathon, definitely. And there's a lot of things that we can learn. I think one of the most valuable things that I learned was that you need to establish productive, informal dialogues with colleagues, and really reach out across groups as much as you can, because countries tend to just restate their positions, stay within the blocks and groups that they have, and there needs to be a driver of a better type of communication. So that's one thing that I think we achieved with several different type of groupings that came out during the life of these negotiations, like the Cartagena dialogue, and then we had other groupings that just crossed across the G7 and the different the G77, sorry, and the different types of groupings that we had. It's very heartening to see that in climate, as in plastics, small countries have a big voice and can have a lot of agency and action in the United Nations negotiations. And good ideas can gain traction. And so we've seen it with the SDGs, we saw it with the Paris Agreement, now we're seeing it with plastics. I think if there is a good idea and there is that honest intent of getting support from everyone on board, getting as much balance as possible from everybody's priorities in there is a good possibility of it going into fruition. I would also just recommend a deep study into our mistakes, because you can't take 12 years or 14 years for this one. Ours was way too long, way too complex. So I think there's a lot of notes that can come out of the whole Paris Agreement process that can serve as learning for the plastics process, from governance, from rules like voting, facilitation, being professional. There's so many things that would serve as recommendations that I think can produce a speedier way of reaching an agreement.
Andrea, thank you. Thank you very much for making notes of the lessons learned. And actually, I'll jump to you, Manuel, and then we'll go to Joshua, because Andrea made a very important point that indeed is a feature throughout a lot of our work is small states with big voice. So Peru is also a small state having a big voice on plastics, but it had a really big voice on climate too when you were the president of the COP that really turned the tables. And you had commitments not from governments, but from non-governmental actors. So what are those contributions? What can we learn? Let's build on the lessons, as Andrea said, and they're all directed to you, Juliet, and to Joshua.
Yeah, it is true, Maria. I think that the decision that we took in Lima in 2014 by launching this Lima Paris Action Agenda, that it is the former title of what it is currently the Marrakesh Partnership, so the agenda of the non-state actors, it was a great decision. And it has shown to be very effective, most in this time of implementation of the Paris Agreement, in a time in which we are moving the world into systemic transformations in energy, in industry, in buildings and infrastructure, and in land use. And also because it has made possible a strong partnership in between the public and the private, that it is the only way to implement the agreement. So why we took that decision in Lima? What happened? And as I mentioned in my first intervention, the idea of systemic thinking, I am used to thinking that we have to connect dots. And to connect dots means to connect timing dots, the past, the present, and the future. To connect processes, because we have in front of us multiple multilateral processes. To connect the global with the domestic. To connect what we are expecting to achieve with its time that in which that decision it will be implemented. So there are many things that we have to connect. And I think that it was those multiple factors that made us able to think in the Lima Paris Action Agenda. Why? Because at that time, 2014, it was a year after Warsaw, in which we saw a big controversy between actors. Probably some of you remember that in Warsaw, it was organized a coal summit that created a strong reaction from the NGOs, from the civil society, and a kind of divorce of the different actors. And also we used to have at that time, 2013, the business sector talking outside of the venue. So we were thinking, if we are planning to adopt an agreement to achieve something as important as, fortunately, it was Paris, why we shouldn't bring them into the table and to start to have them feeling that they are an important part of the process. So that was the past. The present at that time, it was by thinking again in the implementation and to reinforce the process. The point was how, by bringing the different actors into the table, we could give to the process a new impulse, a new dynamic. But finally, the future for implementing the agreement. We were thinking in the time of implementation, it is exactly the same, Maria, that we are thinking for the CBD. I am a strong believer that we do need to have an action agenda for the nation. And also because the idea of an action agenda, it is that make us able to connect the process, that it is a political process, with the economy and with the social dynamic. And that is a key element. Probably we are getting some success, not as much as we had expected in the climate debate, because we have been able to connect the economy with our objective and with our climate vision. And by doing that, we have all the actors focusing on the same. For sure, we are now in this crisis of credibility, what the UN Secretary General is calling the credibility gap, and we have to sort this crisis. But everybody is looking in the same collective direction for this collective vision of being net zero, with the 1.5, the resilient world, among some others. So it was all those factors that moved us to create the Lima Paris Action Agenda, and finally, a partnership in between Peru and France, the UN Secretary General Office, and the UNOCCC Secretariat. So it was a combination of factors, and fortunately, it was a great decision.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you. Really important issues on connecting the dots across time, across processes, across individuals also. This is what we're doing now, and it's really amazing to see how many of you already know each other. It's like, oh, we haven't seen each other in a while. Great to see you, Andrea. Great to see you, Manuel. And I know that Juliet and Joshua, the permanent secretary at Fiji, met in Nairobi at UNEA. It was a great connection of the dots there. So over to you, permanent secretary, and give us your view on connecting the dots, because we're now coming full circle with Juliet starting with UNEA, the UN Environment Assembly, and those plastics negotiations there. You were there yourself. And what did you see at during that process from your vantage point? And what do you think we can connect, whether it's climate and plastics or the biodiversity agenda, as Manuel was pointing out?
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, fellow panelists. It's such a great pleasure to be with you all today. And yes, indeed, today is yet another opportunity to be connecting the dots, connecting relationships, and connecting our networks. I was talking about earlier, a few minutes ago, about being innovative. Part of being innovative is being able to connect, being able to get expose yourselves to the available solutions. The more we get exposed, the more we travel, the more we meet, the more solutions, and the mind starts thinking creatively, the more exposure to what's available out there. So to me, connecting the dots between the likes of whoever we are today and where we've come from is a major step towards how we build solutions to our communities. Fiji is in one corner of the earth, and it's very easy to get bogged down with our everyday affairs and managing our economy and managing our other issues that we have. But when we connect the dots between what's going on in the world, be it climate resilience or biodiversity, reversal of biodiversity loss or plastic pollution, these are all dots that can get connected, come into one single solution for our people. If you take plastics, for instance, the amount of plastics ending up in our oceans is dramatically increasing. And this does affect the livelihood of our populations in two ways. One is, of course, our internal plastic pollution. And of course, the next is, as a small island state, or for that matter, any country, the trans-border plastic that gets driven into our shores. The UN, before I go there, the commitment from small island development states to develop a global agreement on the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee was a great step forward. And our work is, of course, underway, and so that we can present a legally binding instrument, which is similar to what we saw, if it can happen in climate change. And obviously, we connect the dots here and see how we could enhance and collaborate internationally to facilitate technology capacity building and technical cooperation. And supported by the organizations like UNEP. And what we need for acceleration is exactly what we're doing today, being able to talk and draw from each other's experience and, of course, deploy them wherever we are and what we do. The UN Ocean Decade, 21 to 30 for Sustainable Development States, that the next 10 years, of course, are going to be the most important for humanity than in the last 100 years of what we've tried to survive as mankind, humankind. Our commitments in the past have been, of course, when we started off with plastic levy a few years ago, I'm going back to 17, sorry. The first year we had an uptake of about 70% reduction in plastic consumption overall in the region. And that was a dramatic, and that was a year where the president as well. So it just did a big win, as in not just the amount of plastic reduction, but the amount of awareness it brought among not just the retailers, but among the general populace of the country. And of course, the next step was to ban, and it was a total ban. So what we did was we had to come up with innovative ways, because we didn't have big dollars to go about raising awareness, grinding in our PR machinery and things like that. So we did small things like doing live on-camera compliance, on-camera surveillance and monitoring, jumping into shops, jumping into marketplaces with vernier calipers, being able to measure the thickness of plastic bags and spot finding people. Also looking at closing the tap, the manufacturers having huge fines, $150,000 worth fines. So those kinds of things, giving room for the ban to display its way, and being able to provide the policy. So we always believe that if we have to pull in regulation, then we have to support it with policy, providing special economic zones for alternative materials for plastic manufacturing. Instead of plastic, we were able to bring in alternative technologies and provide tax incentives for us to be able to do it. And for the first ever, unprecedented in the Pacific, we were able to introduce zero plastic and zero waste private sector within Fiji. So things like these not just showed our commitment, but it showed that we were able to not just collaborate, but collaborate internally with our private sector as well. So we have practically approached it. And so when this NIC comes up under the global agreement, we would have gone several steps ahead in being able to implement, not just through collaboration, but through practical steps internally within the government as well. And of course, protecting our communities through physical infrastructure, nature-based solutions, reversing biodiversity through nature-based solutions, reversing pollutions, reversing oceanic pollution through having nature-based solutions in every community that we are able to put in. We've already done a couple of dozen communities that are modeled to protect our oceans from plastic bag pollution. At the same time, have nature-based seawalls that protect themselves, make themselves resilient from rising sea levels and coastal erosion.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this input. We are seeing here common threads of small states, small actions with big impact, and what individuals can actually do. I'm going to go to a lightning round now. We have only 20 minutes left in this session, and you hold so much knowledge, so much expertise. We have questions coming in, but this is a UNEP at 50 dialogue. You have all been engaged with UNEP in some respect, and I want to do a lightning round. All of you. What do you know UNEP for? What does UNEP stand out for you, or stand out with? It's just like a small state. It's a small institution. How has it punched above its weight? And what can it do better? And just a couple of sentences. Manuel, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Maria. You know that in some way you have addressed those questions in your really good book, The Untold Story of UNEP, in which you are saying that there are many factors, a combination of agenda, limited mandates, not independence, among some others. But you know, I am all the time thinking that it is not about the size. It is about your gravity. I always thinking that UNEP a bit more brave, and it can define transformational change slots in which they develop their actions, because the multilateral processes are not linear. They have lots of connections in UNEP can exploit its potential and its expertise and background to develop it. Let me put a couple of examples. UNEP used to be a very active actor in developing environmental law in Latin America in the 80s and 90s. I remember that clearly. All the background information that we received from UNEP, the regional office at that time in Mexico from UNEP, it was fantastic to develop environmental codes, environmental laws, and many of that environmental regulation. That is something that for the new processes, climate, biodiversity, the SDGs, we still need. And that is something in which UNEP can recover that ability. But also we are now in a time in which people is talking about convergence. How can we connect nature, climate, health, and food? Just to refer to some of those key topics. That is something in which UNEP can work. I think that we do
Manuel, lightning round.
Yeah, no. But let me put a very clear example, because I think that UNEA, the UNEA, it has been a very good support to strengthen UNEP. Look, one of those key decisions that the last UNEA 5.2 took some weeks ago, the nature-based solutions. It is interesting because it has not been the climate community or the biodiversity community. It has been UNEA, it has been UNEP that defined the common ground for something that it is still a bit controversial for many actors. And it has been fantastic to have UNEA and to have UNEP pushing for that kind of common ground. So again, Maria, there are a lot of room for everybody. I am used to thinking that this is not an issue of competition. It is an issue of identifying trends, have a clear vision, identify innovative action, and just implement it, move it. And that probably that is my strong suggestion to UNEP. It is to recover gravity, to recover that ability to connect all those dots, because UNEP is more related to the implementation of all these decisions that we have already taken. Those are some ideas on how to strengthen UNEP.
Thank you, Manuel. We're going to be writing the next book, the UNEP at 75. Recover gravity. That's a very interesting recommendation. Andrea, let's come to you, and then we'll come to Fiji and Rwanda.
Yes, so I think UNEP plays a very big role in terms of being a lighthouse, of showing us the way in certain key areas. So for decisions to be made in a good way, you need science, and you need to be able to make science-based decisions. And I feel like UNEP does provide, in many cases, that guidance and that science that alerts the different level of actors that need to take action. So if you take the UNEP gap report, for example, for those who don't know, what UNEP does is publishes where we need to be in terms of climate change mitigation versus where we are. And unfortunately, always signals that we have a huge gap that we need to address. And the same with the production gap report, where UNEP comes out and says, okay, well, this is where we need to be, and countries are planning to produce this amount of fossil fuels, and there's a dissonance even within the commitments and the plans of countries. So I think those lighthouse reports for me are critical, because they then are the basis for work of campaigners to bring this to the attention of the public. There's also outreach to decision makers, and hopefully more and more decision makers start listening to the science. And it also is obviously a very important input for technical people that work in this space. So this work for me is one of the essential things that I consider UNEP does, and that produces a lot of more action and work to go out. So I hope we continue to see it, and see it to arrive at the hands of more and more people.
Thank you, Andrea. So we're seeing this really a refreshing view of, okay, this is a really important small institution. It can really punch above its weight, and yet here is where it can fill in, where it can do even more. So Permanent Secretary, over to you. Where do you see UNEP? What is that small institution up to?
To us, UNEP
in the Pacific and as a small island development state, UNEP has been a bulwark in being able to support and assist us in terms of awareness raising. They signify to us in so many ways that whether it's bringing together the resources in terms of not just research and academia, but also financial resources, being able to coordinate between the industry and the government, and of course the key players. UNEP has played a strong role that has buttressed solutions for us. Very practical, and I think it's probably because of the sheer small size of the institution that helps it to be able to be simpler. And when you think of UN, you think of a large functionary and large group, and the ability to be able to reach out to smaller groups. And I think UNEP has done very well for us and continues to do very well for us in terms of all of these things that I have mentioned. Areas where we could, of course, benefit a lot more is their presence, a stronger presence in smaller islands, or even being able to have representations into issues and being able to be available there on the spot. But I would really say where they are now, right now, from where they are, they've done a great job for us. We continue to work with them, partner with them in our solutions, so they can not just help us with financial resources, but also help us with technical resources and partnerships and coordination.
Thank you very much. We do indeed see the value added that the various UN institutions have had for these processes, especially from the point of view of small states. So Juliet, you entered the process on the plastics resolution negotiation in the UN Environment Assembly in UNEA, not really having negotiated there before. And so what did UNEP bring to you? And indeed, this was the setting in which you asked me to join the Rwanda delegation, for which I am deeply grateful. It was bold, it was courageous of Rwanda to put in not only a non-national of Rwanda on the government delegation negotiating the plastics agreement, but also an academic. That I am. There were no other academics at the UN Environment Assembly. And Andrea and Manuel, I know in climate, that is the norm. The delegations bring in people from NGOs, from business, from academia on their national delegations. This is not something that is common practice at UNEA, and yet Rwanda led the way, not only in the negotiation of the resolution, but also on the makeup of the delegation. So, Juliet, where do you see UNEP stand?
Thank you so much, Maria. Yeah, I think I see UNEP as a great source of data. They share a lot of knowledge. UNEP shares a lot of knowledge, which actually helps us on a country level to develop policies that are informed by that knowledge, that data that is generated from that, so to speak, small institution. I've also seen piloting. A lot of projects are piloted, and for us, this looks like proof of concept that this can be actually be done, can be upscaled. An example from Rwanda, UNEP funded the first establishment of development of an integrated green village. And here we were trying to capture the poverty environment nexus for us to see that managing the environment is not only about the natural resources, it's also about how do we get a livelihood, how do we get more money out of managing of the environment. So this was a proof that people can settle in a green village with all clean energy, water, rainwater harvesting, and so on, and composting, to name it. And these people settled in these communities are actually enjoying better life than the rest that are not in this kind of model villages. So this was upscaled at a country level, but I know it started with UNEP's ability to pilot such ideas. So Maria, 50 years down the road, maybe we want to see UNEP upscale these so many great concepts that have been developed all through the 50 years. I don't know if this is in the vision of UNEP, but I think 50 years down the road, maybe we want to now jump into the actual upscaling of these concepts across the member states. So the UNEP also offers a great platform to share knowledge. You just mentioned the UNEA, and that platform brings together many people. They come with a lot of ideas, and the fact that we can spend a week interacting with people from different setups, from government, from civil society, from academia, faith-based organizations. I think that's a rich platform that UNEP provides us. And by the time you're out of that setup, there is a lot of takeaway actions that we always go back home with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, and I'm going to pick up on a question from Dan Reeve-Snyder, whom you know was an important environmental leader from the U.S. State Department. And Dan is asking if plastics can learn from our mistakes in climate. What mistakes stand out to you? As this dialogue is about learning from climate for this plastics work that we're all doing. And I also, Dan wrote that I outed him out, that he's in the room. And I also want to say I'm delighted to have Todd Stern with us too, as part of in this room as one of the participants who was the lead negotiator on climate. So Todd, please feel free to also answer this question in the chat. But so what are those key mistakes? Manuel, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Andrea because you were in the climate space, and then we will go to Joshua and Juliet of how we learn. Manuel.
Wow, that is a very difficult question, because I am wondering to Dan, what are those mistakes? And it is not that I am saying that this process has been perfect, for sure not. But you know that I am all the time thinking as jugglers throwing balls to the air, that we are trying to balancing all those balls and to make a good performance. Because what I'm trying to say, in the climate debate, since the failure of Copenhagen, we've been trying to balance the multilateral process with a sense of urgency. We've been trying to create confidence, but on the other hand, to attend the most the vulnerability of the most poorest countries of the world. We've been trying in defining targets in a way in which gradually we could make it more enforceable. We've been trying, so I am all the time wondering how much of all those elements has been good and how much has not. Let me go back into the example of the non-state actors. When we released that agenda, when we launched, that agenda in Lima in 2014, we did it without any rule. And we knew that that wouldn't be probably the best way because it could create kind of greenwashing. But again, you are in that sense balancing your ability to convene and then to clean up. No, I am personally a believer that sometimes you have to define ways to convene and then to start to cleaning up. Because if you start by defining too strict rules, probably your ability to convene, it won't be enough to have all the peoples in the same table. It is, for example, what it is happening with SBTI, the Science-Based Target Initiative. There are some people who is criticizing the speed of SBTI in defining standards. But probably it has been that speed that has created the legitimacy to have SBTI as a good standard setter. So yeah, probably Dan, I am not answering your question, but for me, those are the elements that looking for that balance, that it is something that also we should bring into the plastic debate and for a plastic treaty. And what are those elements and what is exactly the objective that in that specific topic we are looking for? Probably I have not been clear, but those are immediately the reflections that come into my mind.
Yes, we only have 3 minutes left. I know Scott Hay just put a very important issue in the chat box, but I want to answer Dan's question, Andrea. What are the lessons from climate that we need to move forward with?
So I think there's a lot when you can design a project from the beginning, looking at a process from the beginning, looking at other processes and how to make them better is always a good idea. I think there's some processes that you can study that have voting, for example, and some that are consensus based. And I think you need to consider both things there, and probably a combination or a middle point should be a good path to be able to make speedier decisions, but also bring everyone that's needed for implementation along in the agreement. But I believe that rules like that would have sped up probably. We will never know, of course, discussions in the climate world if you don't have to have 100% consensus. There's other things on design that need to be considered, like if you do a more demanding and stringent approach, but of course you're going to have less members, or if you make it easier to comply, but then broader. And again, where you draw that line in plastics is going to be very important decision. And finally, I think there's a lot that you could do with the secretariat and the format of negotiations and the training of facilitators. And this is not a criticism because I was a facilitator as well. But I think people that are professional facilitators also help in these meetings, and obviously that would not be a bad thing to have someone that's professionally trained in facilitation to guide through the procedures. But yeah, so my key messages are that design and governance from the beginning, especially, I think will be a thing to study carefully with our experience and others.
And Andrea, thank you very much. And I'll pick up on this. The professional training of facilitators is something that is not standard practice indeed. And so coming from where I am at an academic institution in a Department of Conflict Resolution, Human Security and Global Governance that does this for a living, we train people, there is a lot of space here. And indeed, when Cristiana Figueres was on our campus multiple times, this is what our colleagues asked: are your facilitators professionally trained? And so it's a complicated answer to that of why these political processes go the way they do. But with this, we are coming to the hour. I just want to ask one last question that is coming from one of our PhD students, Jack Whitaker, who says, in addition to the bold action of adding an academic on their delegation, how might member states lead in the future in new ways? So we will leave with that from the member states. So Permanent Secretary, over to you, and then Juliet, you will conclude our session today. Oh, there you are. But Manuel, see the chat. The response from Todd Stern and from Dan Reeve-Snyder is resonating. So yes, Joshua, please.
If I just have a single line, what I was about to say was, if the lessons that we have learned from the past has been to be able to, whatever we do in terms of this legal binding document, and if you're going to compare from the lessons learned from the Paris Agreement and how we've implemented it, this time around, whatever we do, we make sure we reflect provide diverse alternatives to address the full life cycle of plastics and the design of reusable products and materials, and the need for a good, strong coalition internationally to collaborate and facilitate technology, access to information, and capacity building. So these areas, if we could improve on this time around, that will be my message for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And my team, please send me a note on who's winning the book today. And Juliet, please how can member states lead better?
Thank you so much. First of all, allow me to appreciate Maria and your team for providing this space. There is a lot of knowledge shared here, lots of things to learn from, even in our day-to-day work that we are dealing with. When it comes to negotiations and how member states should lead, I think we should lead with an ear, we should listen. First of all, I think it's very critical to listen, to understand what our fellow member states are trying to communicate. I have a feeling sometimes we spend more hours negotiating just because we didn't understand what a fellow negotiator is trying to communicate. And this is when I think academia helps sometimes. How do you bring me out of my comfort zone as the chief negotiator? Sometimes we have big titles, but how do we break down the message that we want to deliver during negotiations? I think I felt that support from Maria. Sometimes I have the technical understanding of what I'm trying to communicate, but we are at different stages in those negotiation rooms. So how do we be able to communicate effectively, and how do we be able to listen and engage with colleagues? How do we even feel the importance of networking? There is a lot that has to go on before we enter those negotiation rooms. And I think this is what a member state should be doing before we enter any negotiations, to try and understand where the different member states groups are at regarding a given subject that you're negotiating for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliet. I really appreciate it. We are after the hour now, 5 minutes. I know, Manuel, you wanted to say something. Do you have one word or two words?
Very short. You know that I am a council member with the Aspen Institute of a council that it is discussing how to promote leadership and management in the public sector. And that is key. And in my point of view, that is what I suggest in the public sector, to invest in public sector leadership and management, to have people that can move things towards a clear vision, strategic planning, to deliver. Because we are, unfortunately, we are used to investing that in the private sector, right, not too much in the public. We do need to have new leaders in the public sector.
Fantastic. And if I may end that, we do this hand in hand with academia, because that is also where we hold expertise, but we have not connected with the public sector closely enough. And with that, I would like to announce that Larissa Shelkin from Global STEM Classroom has won a copy of the book. Larissa, you will be getting it in the mail. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Really appreciate the amazing discussions that we've had with the small states in the room and the big states in the chat room. We had the United States very active in the chat room. And so, yes, we are collaborating. We are connecting the dots. This is our last dialogue in the series, celebrating UNEP at 50. The next installment is the Stockholm at 50 conference. And so with that, I thank you for joining us throughout an entire year. Thank you, Juliet Kabera, Andrea Guerrero, Manuel Pulgar-Vidal, and Joshua Wycliffe. Really appreciate your presence today, and we look forward to bold leadership and connecting more dots than ever.